Everyone, Scott here. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, we talk about dieting, weight loss, and living a healthy lifestyle. Look, it's January 2nd today, so it's a very brand new beginning of the year, and I thought it'd be fun to talk a little bit about like what's going to happen in 2025, especially what's going to happen in diet trends in 2025. In my last video, we talked about what I'd like to see go away in the new year, but I also want to talk about probably what we're going to see as we look towards the future of dieting and exercise and just healthy lifestyle living. Now, granted, I'm no expert. I'm not a medical professional. I'm just an everyday guy when it comes to diet and fitness. But looking at some of the ideas that I have been reading on the internet and watching other influencers and YouTubers and stuff like that, I think I have a little bit of idea what we can expect here in 2025. So let's talk about it. But before we go there, let's talk a little bit about where we've been with dieting. I thought it was kind of fun to take a look back, maybe a little bit farther back, even though I did in my last video going through the decades. But if you remember back in 2010, like there was two diet trends that kind of happened. And the first one was Atkins. There was like a resurgence in Atkins, which if you're not familiar with Atkins, it's like a low carb, all like high fat meats and stuff like that. And that diet actually became really popular like in the early 2000s. I remember buying an Atkins book at Walden Books a million years ago in the mall. For you youngins out there, you probably don't even know what that is. But yeah, I mean, Atkins has been around forever. In the 2010s, it kind of had a little bit of resurgence, which eventually would turn into kind of like the keto diet, if you will, which I'll talk about in a second. Another one that kind of like started in the 2010s, which I had to laugh when I saw this, was the paleo diet, which is the one where you're supposed to eat like your ancestors. And I actually do think there's some merit to that diet where you only eat like raw foods and you only eat things that like your caveman ancestors would eat, because at the end of the day, that is combating a world of high processed, highly refined foods, which I do think has some merit to it. But again, there's also some advantages to some of the stuff that is processed too. I think you have to kind of look at both sides and really define what makes the most sense. So paleo diet, take it or leave it. I do think there is some merit to it, but ultimately it was like Atkins and paleo were kind of all about that in 2010s. A little bit later on in the decade, we get into like 2013, 2015, and that's when we start to really get into like superfoods. To me in Chicago, that's really like it was all about Whole Foods diets then. Like I remember going to Whole Foods and like you'd see all those green smoothies. And like I remember I had a health practitioner, kind of like a holistic health practitioner telling me I had to go to Whole Foods and get a green smoothie and eat that every day because that would help me lose weight, right? And although I did go to Whole Foods once and got a green smoothie, it was absolutely disgusting because I think it was like a kale smoothie and I couldn't even finish it. I remember throwing it in the dumpster. So not if that's you, go for it. But I know for me, eating kale smoothies is not exactly the easiest thing to do, especially for just getting into diet and exercise. So as the 2013, 14, 15 kind of grew, of course, there was like other sort of like inklings of veganism and other sort of non-meat trend going on at that time as well. We get into like the later half of the 20 teens, if you will. This is really when we start to see like Whole30 starting to take traction. The ketogenic diet, I think, was definitely full swing by the later part of the 20 teens. What's interesting, I remember when that was like first really popular, people were like testing saliva samples and everything like that with keto. I remember this person I worked with, her husband was doing it and like he was doing his samples. And again, like I'm not a keto hater. I think there are definitely some merits to every single one of these diets that I'm going to talk about, but I also think there's some disadvantages too. And we're going to get into that as we get into trends. And then of course, if you talk about keto, you got to talk about sugar free, like obviously sugar, refined sugars, high fructose corn syrups. I've talked about that a million times on this channel. I do not like them. I try to avoid them like the plague. But at the same time, I think we were really starting to identify that maybe salt wasn't the enemy and that sugar was actually part of the problem in the American diet. So definitely that brings us into like the later half of the 20 teens where we're starting to see more about like the gut microbiome and intermittent fasting. Dr. Fung published his book on fasting, and it was becoming a really big thing. I remember reading about it and being super excited about fasting because I'm like, oh, all I had to do was not eat. How easy is that, right? As the 20 teens ended out before the pandemic, we also were seeing a trend, you could say, of like the collagen diets or collagen supplements. I don't really know if that's a diet trend, but like you remember the Vital Proteins, which is actually a Chicago company, so not knocking them, but Vital Proteins came on the street, and of course, these are all things that were going to help increase your microbiome and increase your sustainability and just live healthier. And then finally, I think right before the pandemic, we saw like cauliflower. Like everyone was doing keto, so they weren't eating carbs. So we had cauliflower pizza, cauliflower, uh, French fries, cauliflower recipes all over the place, right? All these memes all over the place, or all these internet things, viral internet since recipes going on around cauliflower, which we still see today. And actually, I do think there are some merits with that as well. But it's a matter of like you can to have too much of a good thing, and for me, cauliflower can be a good thing. I think then as like the pandemic came along, the diet world shifted a little bit because we were living at home. Our schedules changed for the first time ever. We were seeing new ways to order food. I think people were getting more health conscious because they were sitting more, they were being more homebodies. So if you weren't like that, that wasn't typically your lifestyle. That probably was something you were being more cognizant of. I know for me, that was the beginning of the end of my health journey, if you will, because towards the end of the pandemic is when I had bariatric surgery. So being at home was really difficult. I think I was really happy that I was part of a support group at the time for weight loss, because if I wasn't, I probably would have gained like 200 pounds, right? So at least I sort of maintained my weight during that period. But I know for a lot of us, since we were drinking and eating more processed foods during that time, also just worrying in general, because the world had changed for a lot of us in a lot of different ways. I think it really brought on a lot of different things. But that's also when we started to see new ways for us to get food delivered, not only through apps like DoorDash and Grubhub and Seamless and all these sort of like Uber Eats, like all these DoorDash tools, which opened up both good and bad channels of foods into our lives and into our families. We also saw new things too, like the food kits and the pre-processed or pre-made home kits like Home Chef and Hello Fresh and stuff like that. So, and they're all over the place now. The program's part of the American lexicon now, the home food delivery services. But ultimately, like that changed a lot, like the logistics of things. And I think that also is a positive thing, because if you are not really a fan of cooking, or you want to make your own meals and you want the ingredients delivered to you, I think that's a really fantastic way to optimize your diet. Now, that being said, I also think it's also good to go to the grocery store and pick this up yourself if you can. But if it means eating that versus going to fast food or going to other stuff, I say the meal kits are the way to go. Now, let's talk a little bit more about more recent times. And I think that we're really starting to see a lot of changes in lots of different areas of dieting. Obviously, everyone has seen it. It's everywhere. GLP-1, the Semaglutide or Selmatide, I don't even know what it is, but for diabetes medication is helping people lose weight. Primarily, they are prescribed for people who are morbidly obese, or they are type 2 diabetics or type 1, type 2 diabetics. I'm not a doctor, so I don't know exactly how that works, but I do know these are all over the world right now. And I'm getting ads every single day for weight loss medication, which is funny considering I don't even need it anymore, but here we are. Another thing that we're seeing a lot of too is the gut microbiome research. We did a fascinating episode on the Big Brains podcast on the gut microbiome with some University of Chicago researchers, and they actually talk about how they're doing a lot more research on how to actually optimize your gut microbiome. Believe it or not, the probiotics that you buy in the store today they don't really do anything. There is a lot of research that's going into this because there's money to be made. And at the end of the day, the probiotics that you find at GNC or Whole Foods, they really don't have a lot of merit. The only way to really optimize your microbiome is through A, your diet, and B, like actual fecal matter. And I don't know about you, I don't really want to eat somebody else's fecal matter. So believe it or not, there's research happening on this. And I think we're going to see a lot of changes in that in the future. But we are really seeing is that mind gut health connection, where your mind is definitely one aspect of your body, but your gut actually controls a lot, right? And I think that we're really seeing more connection between mind, gut, and overall health. I think too, as testing becomes more prevalent, like obviously the DNA kits that we're getting from like apps like 23andMe and stuff like that are creating it more easier to do testing at home. I think that we're seeing a lot more DNA testing and that kind of thing. And then ultimately alternate sweeteners. I think one thing too that we can say in 2024 that was a big like jump onto the health industry trend or health diet trend is alternate sweeteners, especially stevia, and combating some of the more known ones like saccharin and equal and other sort of what we would call non-sugar sweeteners that have been on the market for years, aspartame. So basically, I think we're going to see more on that. I do hope that we're not going to see bad things about that. Obviously, stevia is one of those ones where we don't necessarily know the long term health effects of it. I know I drink a lot of it, so I hope everything's going to be okay, but you never know. Everything you consume is a risk, and sometimes you have to go with what you feel is right for you. Obviously, stevia is a non-sugar sweetener, so it has a sweetness like sugar, but it doesn't actually spike your blood insulin levels like traditional table sugar would. So that's one of the reasons why I like to put it in my coffee. So what do we learn from all these different diets? I mean, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. You could go back farther. You could talk about Mediterranean diet. You could talk about the Hilton Head diet. You could talk about the grapefruit diet. I mean, you could talk about all these different diet trends that have been happening for eons. And I think that what we've learned is that we really know a lot about nothing. Right? It's we still don't necessarily have a complete 360 overall understanding of how our bodies work and how calories come in and calories go out. What I do know that is consistent with all these different diets is that the more you eat, the more calories you take in, the more weight you're going to gain long term. It goes back to calories in and calories out. If you overeat your daily caloric intake, for most of us, that's like 1,200 to 1,800 calories, depending on how active you are and your age and your height and all that stuff. You can look it up online there's a million calorie calculators out there. If you eat more than what you're supposed to, you're going to gain weight. Like that, we do know. If you eat certain things, you probably will gain more weight than others. When I mean certain things, if you eat a lot of high processed foods that have hidden calories in them, for example, ice cream, cookies, baked goods, stuff that has multiple ingredients in it, you probably are going to gain more weight just because all those multiple ingredients have their own set of calories. So, for example, a really good thing that I eat every single day is overnight oats. Okay, I get the regular oats from the store. I make my overnight oats. I use almond milk, and that's it. And if you look at the calorie count of just oats and almond milk, it's really little. I can eat a whole serving would be maybe 100 calories. Now, granted, that's mostly high dietary fiber, and there's not a lot of sugar in that, so I could eat that and would not wouldn't count for anything. Now, what's interesting is that when you start throwing in ingredients like protein powder or apples or like I let down some peanuts for a little bit of crunch to mine. Like you start adding ingredients or you put like sugar-free syrup on top of it. That's when you take like 100 calorie thing and turn it into a 300 calorie thing. And that may be okay depending on your overall daily diet. But if you think about that, when you add those added ingredients, so whether that's like through actual making something or you have the added ingredients that are actually baked into the something you bought at the store, then that's when calories tend to go up. And that's when you overeat, or at least not even know you're overeating because you're not getting the volume you would if you were eating a big plate of different ingredients. So what we do know is that if you eat too many calories, you're probably going to gain weight. And if you don't eat enough calories, you're probably going to lose weight. Right. So we know a lot. We know everything about nothing at the end of the day. But what's interesting is that there is a lot more research being poured into diet and exercise. And I think that a few things that we are also noticing too is that researchers have said that exercise does not always equal weight loss. That what we do know is that while consumption, whether that's through food or through drinks, does tend to equal calories in, calories out, working out doesn't necessarily equal weight loss in diet. So if you're planning on going to hit the gym because you want to lose 20 to 30 plus more pounds this year, first of all, go do it. Do you. But second of all, don't be disappointed if you go to start going to the gym, you hit it regularly and you don't lose a ton of weight quickly because exercise is an extremely difficult way to lose weight. It can help. It can make you feel better. It can put you in the right mindset and it can help build muscles in areas that make you feel better. But it's probably not going to necessarily be the number one driver that's going to take weight off your belly. That's most likely going to come from being calorie deficient, which you do that through your actual cooking, eating diet. Predicting the top 5 trends for 2025. How appropriate, 5 for 25, right? I think we're going to see a lot more when it comes to plant-based diets. I know I've been doing a lot more with like taking meat out of my diet and dairy. I'm not a vegetarian. I'm not, I still eat meat very much. But when I'm doing this, I'm just limiting the amount of dairy and meat because I don't feel that meat is necessarily a good thing for me when I'm trying to lose weight. Now, if I'm trying to bulk up, meaning putting fat on or putting calories in me to grow my muscles, that would be a different story. But if you're like me trying to trim down, you need to be deficient in calories. And meats are very high dense, high calorie things that often come with a lot of protein, but not a lot of dietary fiber. So while they can be helpful, especially lean meats like lean chicken, lean fish, low fatty meats like non-ground beef, like more like, actual cuts of chicken or beef are better than like ground beef that's all fat. You have to be very careful because one really large ground beef patty can have thousands of calories in it if it's full of fat, right? And fat is fat. So at the end of the day, I think we're going to see more the fact that there are a lot of really high quality veggies like beans and lentils and grains that actually do bring a lot of high value to our diets, especially when it comes to satiety, and just overall empowering your body to live your best self. So I think a lot more there. I also think we're going to see a lot more meat alternatives this year. The growing trend of like Impossible burgers and like I forget the name brands. It doesn't really matter, but the alternate meats and stuff like that are actually made from plants. Of course, I think we're going to see more of that this year. And I don't necessarily think they're a bad thing, but at the end of the day, again, calories are calories. So it's up to you if you want to eat that or not. And just be careful. A lot of times they replace a lot of the flavoring, they replace that with oils, right? Which oils are fat. So you have to be careful. A vegan or a Impossible, whatever, may not necessarily be that much better for you than an actual piece of lean beef, chicken, or fish. Trend number 2 for 2025, I think we're going to continue to see more with the gut microbiome. As I mentioned, there's research happening at the University of Chicago right now that's focusing on how to optimize your gut microbiome. We do know that your gut has more effects on your whole body than it is. And of course, the other thing too, I think expelling waste or going to the bathroom, I think is another area that we're going to see more research on and more tools for helping people go to the bathroom better as well. Now, trend number 3, I think is actually one that we've seen some of this, but I think it's going to be sort of supercharged in 2025. And this is like wearable tech. For years we've had Fitbits, we've got the Apple Watch and stuff like that. I think these are all things that we're going to continue to see. But what's interesting is how useful and how resourceful tools like AI and ChatGPT are helping these apps become more useful to you. Like they can answer your questions and they can give you a little bit more of a comprehensive overview of what you're actually doing with your working out and with your diet. So I think that we're going to see a lot more of that, especially apps that actually track your calories for you. Like you can take a picture of food and the app will tell you how many calories are in it. And I think this is going to be a lot better for calorie tracking, for macro tracking, which I think is a huge and important part of any diet trend that you are doing. Because as I mentioned a million times, calories in, calories out. If you're tracking your calories and you have tools that make it easier for you to track your calories, that'll be definitely a good barometer to make sure that you are staying on track with how many calories we're eating. The next one, trend number 4, I think is not so much a diet trend in terms of weight loss or weight gain, but I think it's a diet trend in terms of how the American diet. And I think that we're going to look more towards sustainability in agriculture, sustainability in how we source food, because at the end of the day, we live on planet Earth and it's a natural resource and it will eventually be limited, right? So I think as we continue to go further, more and more, we looking at ways for green agriculture, green sustainability. The slow food movement is definitely a popular one, and just ways that we can be more resourceful with how we produce food, farm, and that kind of stuff, and farm to table, that kind of thing. I can't talk much about that. I don't know a ton about that, but what I do know is that obviously we have to look at diet as more than just an individual thing, but diet as a society as a whole. And I think that there's a lot we can learn from how we actually gather food here in a post-industrial technology-based society, even potentially using tools like AI to help us better farm, better source, and better plan how much food we need and where the food needs to be. And then finally, trend number 5 for 2025 is that the unknown is the unknown. I mean, no matter what we do, we can talk about all these different things. We can go into the past, we can live in the present, but the truth is we cannot predict the future. I remember a couple of years ago, if you would have told me we would add ChatGPT, I would have said you're crazy, right? And I think that that's one thing that we have to be sort of cognizant about, is that we have to be ready for change. Obviously, what I do think is what we're going to see a big change in the world, the whole diet culture in general, is the fact that we have more medical resources like GLP-1 medications for people who are dealing with extreme obesity. And I think that's a good thing. I think that once people are able to sort of make themselves get to a controllable weight, then they can potentially take it from there. So, most importantly, I think what we will see is that there will be less of this like get thin fast trends, because what we do know is there's no magic bullet when it comes to weight loss. Even on GLP-1 medications or even bariatric surgery, like me, like it's a lifestyle process. It takes a long time to change. If you want to just lose 5 pounds, then just don't eat for 2 days, I guess. But I don't recommend doing that. But at the end of the day, when you are just like, there's no way to take off fat from your body without doing it over a period of time. So what I do hope is that we do change the diet culture a little bit to this whole like lose weight quickly and more onto how to live a healthier lifestyle, because that is really what's going to create a better ecosystem. And most importantly, a way for us to all be accountable for each other. And that's why I hope you like and subscribe to this channel. Whether you like this information or not, I think it's really helpful. And I do hope that you can follow me so we can stay accountable with each other in the new year. Thanks for watching, and we'll see how this year shakes out.